Hey, welcome to the shop. So part of my career I spent as a supervisor over an aerospace shop, and a big part of that was hiring for jobs including welders. So I'm going to walk you through the interview process so you know how to stand out and look good and rise to the top, coming from my perspective on the other side of the table. So let's just walk through the process. So before, when you're getting ready, you want to make sure your resume's in good shape. A lot of times I get resumes that were 5 or 6 pages. I'm reviewing a bunch of them, don't really have time for that. And so it's better to just boil down to the main key things. Usually 1 page is good, maybe 2 if you've got a lot of stuff, but I wouldn't go beyond that. Also make sure it's neatly organized and easy to follow every job that you went through, and list out your certifications right up there at the top of the resume if you have some. Okay, so when you go to the interview, different people have different opinions on what you should wear, but I don't think you need to wear a suit to a welding interview, especially since there's usually a skills test to demonstrate your welding ability. So I would say wear something like a shirt of some kind with a collar on it, at least, tucked into a nice pair of jeans or a nice pair of work pants. Will be a pretty good thing to wear. Just take care for your appearance. I'd leave the baseball cap, the chewing gum, and the sunglasses at home. It'll really come across a lot better if you take a little care for your appearance. Now, some things to bring with you. 1, I would bring with you your welding hood, maybe a welding jacket and gloves that are appropriate for the type of welding that you expect to do at the job, because you're probably going to need to go down in the shop and run a bead or 2 at least. So have those with you to be ready. The other thing I'd bring with you is a copy of your resume, because sometimes the systems where job applications go through will turn the resume into plain text. And then that gets printed out for the interviewer, and I get resumes and it'd be like, oh man, this got all jumbled up, and I wouldn't realize it till I'm in the room there, and it was just really distracting. So if you have your resume ready, you can just hand it over and be like, hey, I can see that one printed out strange. Here, I brought a copy in for you, and that'll be super helpful for someone like me. So let's just walk through some of the things that I'd ask. So I'd start off by asking, hey, tell me what you know about our company. And it's a good idea to think about that ahead of time and do your research so you have something more to say than, I know you make XYZ product. You don't need to take it too far, but at least go on the company website and do a little research. And it's not a bad idea to do that anyway, because if you care about your job and your career, and where you're going to be spending so much time during your life, it's worth taking the time to understand a little bit about the company. So do that research ahead of time. Be ready to answer a question like that and to know that. The next thing I would do is just go through each job that you had and ask, what did you do at Acme Corporation? And you could reply and say, well, I did this and this and the other. And it's a good idea if you can think about skills that you had there that would relate to the job that you're looking for. So let's say at this previous job at Acme Corporation, let's say you were cleaning some kitchen area. And, that's different from welding. So you're interviewing for a welding job now. Maybe you learned some welding, you went to trade school, or you had a welding job in between. You could say, when I was here at Acme Company, I was cleaning the kitchen here, and I had really detailed procedures and a checklist I needed to follow to make sure that everything was done thoroughly so we wouldn't have a food poisoning incident. And that shows that you can follow procedures and instructions, or you could show that you were always there or dependable in some way or responsible for something. And so those skills can translate to your welding job. So that's a good idea if you can tie those together. Now be ready to tell why you left each job, right? So you may say, I got a better job, and so I left Acme Company and went to XYZ Corporation because the job was a really good opportunity. Or maybe you got laid off or furloughed or something like that, and that's totally understandable. Or maybe you got fired. And if you got fired, think ahead of time how you're going to explain that. Now, I had a ton of people that go into long stories with lots of drama about situations where they were let go from a job. That was never helpful for them. So it's better to just, you want to be honest. You don't want to beat around the bush, but you don't need to dwell on it for a long time. So it's better if you can just say, really briefly, without too much personal detail, what happened and maybe what you learned from it or what you would have done different, if you knew what you knew now. So once you go through all of that history, then I would usually ask some character-based questions. And now, being the best welder isn't the only thing that qualifies someone for the job. Other things are equally or even more important, because we could train somebody to become a better welder, but it was very difficult to train somebody to become dependable or to become honest or to have a good work ethic. So if you can demonstrate those things, that's important. And with all of these questions, if you can answer it with an experience or a story that shows it, that's way better than just saying, yeah, I always showed up for work, or something like that, right? So some of the questions that I would ask are, tell me about a time you had a disagreement with a coworker and how you resolved that. And so you might want to think about some challenges that you overcame with people. Also challenges with projects, because I might ask, tell me about a project that was particularly difficult and how you approached that. So think through just a bunch of different stories and experiences and things. Another might be, tell me about a time where you made a mistake and it scrapped a part or caused a part to be reworked. And let's say you haven't had a welding job in the past. You could go back to welding school and say, well, one joint that I was working on for a project, I read the welding symbol backwards, and then I found that it was installed incorrectly, and now I know how to properly read that, and now I know to double check and to ask if I'm not sure on a welding symbol. And so you can explain that for a situation like that. So think through just a bunch of stories that can be used to answer these questions that you might get about different situations. Then after I'm asking questions, it's your turn to ask me questions. So it's a good idea to think through, okay, what are some good questions to ask? I would not ask about salary at this point. I wouldn't ask, how much are you going to pay me? All right, save that for after you get the offer. If you need to negotiate salary, you can do it at that point. But some good questions might be, what do you like about working at this company? Or what do you not like about working at this company? Or, how would you describe the culture here at this company? Those types of things. You could ask about other things like work schedule and shifts, because sometimes there's different shifts that are available, and they may have a pay differential. If you don't mind, if you're a bit of a night owl, right? You might make a little more money there. So anyway, those are some things to think about, to discuss during the interview. After that, I'm going to take you and I'm going to walk you down to the shop. And down there, we're going to have one of the senior welders will be set up with some coupons to weld together in a fixture. And they'll represent whatever type of welding you're going to do. And different companies may do it a little differently, but usually we'd have everything kind of set up there for you. Now, when you go down to the shop, first thing to ask, hey, is there a welding procedure for this? And if there is, then make sure to go through it line by line. Don't skip anything, because somebody might have been balling their tungsten right when we walked up and switched the polarity. So check everything. If they say, no, we don't, there's not a procedure for this, just run it to the best of your ability, then, just go ahead and get everything set up the best you can. And it's okay to ask a question in that case. You could be like, hey, I don't usually run this cup size on my torch. What gas flow rate would you run with that? And I think that's an okay type of question to ask, so that you make sure you're ready and set up for success. So make sure you're thinking ahead, take your time, don't delay too much, but take your time to be thorough about it. And then run that sample to the very best of your ability. Now, after you weld it, take a look over the sample, and usually, at least for us, it wasn't a certification test, and most places it won't be. It'll just be a demonstration of your skill. So it doesn't have to be perfect to get the job most of the time. But, different people may have different opinions about this, and that's okay. But, from my perspective, if you see something that's not right about the sample you ran, it's good to call it out. For example, you might say, oh, you know what? That went pretty well, but I see there's a little bit of undercut right here. This machine ran a little different than the machine I've been running in the past. but I know I'd need to run weld at a little bit slower travel speed to avoid that undercut that I got there. And so that's what I'd do on the next one. And for me, I totally overlook the undercut in that case, or whatever it is, because, you know, that's a really great thing that you demonstrated, that you know what went wrong and how you would correct that going forward. So, you know, if something didn't go quite right, my opinion is it's a good idea to call it out. You don't need to dwell on it. You don't need to do a whole, you know, lot of time on it, but it's a good idea to say, hey, I can see that this happened. I know why, and I know how to fix it. Those are some pretty good things. After that, they may give you a tour of the shop. If they don't, I think it's not a bad idea to ask, hey, do you mind showing me around the shop a little bit? Because I know for me, I've had people in for interviews and, you know, been kind of on the fence about, you know, some of their answers that they'd given before. But after going on a tour and walking around the shop with them and seeing the interest that they had in different things and having a little conversation that could clarify some of their answers from before, I was much more convinced that they were a good candidate. So it's not a bad idea to get just a little bit more time with your interviewer and to get a little more information for you in the shop, because you can look around and see, are people happy? Is this place a mess? Is it put together? Do people seem to know what to do and enjoy being here? Because, you know, you don't want to go to work probably at a place that's a total disaster. You know, you got to do what you got to do, but it's a good idea to look and just make sure, okay, is this the kind of place where I want to be as well? So anyway, after that, interview's done. Your weld test is done. You're probably breathing a little bit easier, hopefully, that you've made it through the whole experience. Hopefully you'll hear back. I know the company that I was doing that type of work at was really good about getting back to people pretty quickly. But if you don't hear anything back after a few days or a week, I think it's okay to call and follow up. Just make sure to be respectful about it, and you know, just ask and understand that there may be other things happening, and it may take a little bit of time some places, but you know, you could still follow up in a very respectful way. So hopefully that gives you some tips and helps you know what to expect when you go in for a welding job interview. And if you go in prepared to answer those questions, take a little care for your appearance, and, you know, be ready to take that welding test and know, you know, what you're doing there, have your skill nice and sharp, then you're going to be right on top to get that job that you're looking for. So I know this is a little different than our usual videos looking at welding skills, but I think it's something important to talk about. So anyway, thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.